Hey everyone, my name's Kelvin and welcome back to my video tutorials here. So before I get started, I just want to apologize about some of the background sound. My landlord here at my office is kind of building something right outside my window. Sorry about that. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to paint a really cute tree. And I don't know why, but I've always been calling these chubby trees. So I think that's what I'm going to call this video. So this video is about how to paint a chubby tree. So I'm going to start out with a blank watercolor paper texture. And in this case, I'm using one called Fabriano Mill, and I'll put a link to that in the description. And I'm going to do almost all of this with the abstract round brush. So I'll put a link to that one as well. So this is a tree this is a kind of a style of tree that you could sketch out first, but you don't really need to do that. I think you can just jump in there with the abstract round brush. And just make some shape and then turn that into a tree. Like it's a very modular kind of process. So for this tree, I'll make a kind of yellowy green foliage there. So I'll set the brush size pretty big and I'll just basically make a random shape of this tree. And then towards the bottom, I'll add a few layers of texture, of color here, just to make it a bit darker. And then I'll grab the water blender and I'll just mix it up real quick. There we go. So that's the basics of the foliage. Now I'm going to make the basically the shadow, and this is why I call this a chubby tree. So let's grab the selection tool and set it to freehand. And just down here, I'm going to sort of make an arc like that, kind of almost like a bubble. And then after I do that 3 or 4 times, I'm just going to quickly cut it off like that. So that's the critical part. Now this bottom part, it's not really important at all. Now while that selection is active, I'm going to go over here to hue, saturation, and brightness. And I'm just going to lower the brightness quite a bit. Not until it's like 100% dark. You know, I'm just super dark so it stands off from the color of the foliage. And then often you'll actually want to lower the saturation just a little bit. And then I'll deselect that. Now I'll go back and grab the water blender again. And at a medium size, maybe 10 or 12%, I'll just mix up that bottom edge. Just sort of fade that down into the foliage. And then over here on the sharp corners, I'll also sort of soften that one. There we go. So that's the basics of the kind of dimensionality of this tree. And now I want to add some color variation. So usually when you add lighting to a scene, I mean, you'll probably have your own technique. But what I often like to do is I first make a random selection like this. I'll feather it out and then just shift the hue a little bit. And what this does is it introduces another color just to make this a little bit less boring. And then I can add the lighting. And usually what that means is I'll just select kind of the upper edge of one of the sides, imagining the lighting is coming here. And I want to give the illusion that it's coming through the tree. So after I make that selection along the edge, I'll feather it out to soften it up. And then I'll go to hue, saturation, and brightness. And I'll brighten it so that it's as if the light is coming through. I'll also shifting it to kind of a yellow color so the lighting is kind of warm. And then I might also raise the saturation just a little bit. And if that doesn't give all the dimension that you want, you can sort of do the inverse on the other side and select the dark side of the tree, feather it out, and then just lower the brightness and increase the saturation as well. So there we go. We've got our 3-dimensional foliage here. And then the trunk of the tree is super simple. I'm just going to make a new layer above the foliage. And I'll choose you could choose a brown color, but actually I want to make this like a birch tree, which has like a light colored bark. And that does present a unique challenge on the white paper. So I'll just use that as an example so I can show you how I'd work around that. So with this white color, this sort of almost white, kind of a gray color, I'll grab the fine liner pen. And at medium size, I'll just do the trunk of the tree like that. And then I think I'll throw in some branches as well, just like that, maybe just 2 branches. And then maybe 1 little branch down here. And then I can go in there and erase it just along that shadow we did. So it sort of looks like the branch is going into the foliage and just kind of disappearing in there. There we go, that looks pretty good. Now you have an issue here where you start to lose contrast with this really light color versus the white background. And that could be worse if your trunk is even lighter, like if I raise the brightness. Basically the trunk almost disappears on the white background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that hard edge watercolor effect that I covered in a previous video. But I'll show you guys how to do it again here. So I'll grab the selection tool set it to automatic. And remember, in the layers panel, we're only working on a layer where it's just the trunk on this layer. So I'm not gonna have to worry about anything else. And using that selection tool, set to automatic, I'll just click and drag over here off into the white, and I'll adjust that selection until I'm just barely catching the edge of the white trunk. And then I'll feather it out just a few percent, just so I'm sort of pushing that selection beyond the edge. Then I'll go to hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll just darken and saturate the edge of that white. And that gives us this hard edge that gives us a lot more contrast when it's on this white background. And because it's a birch tree, I want to add some kind of horizontal lines to it. So I'll just basically go in there with the selection tool. I'll set it to freehand. And then I'll just go in there and just make all these kind of random parallel selections like this. There we go. And I'll go to hue, saturation, and brightness. And I'll just darken it just a tiny bit, just to give me a hint of that sort of pattern that you see on birch trees. And there we go. That's pretty much it. This is just a simple process to painting trees. It's a very modular process, and you can just make you could almost turn any kind of random shape into a cute little tree. So if you have any questions or comments about this, just leave a comment down below. But other than that, guys, thank you so much for your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.